Thank you all. Thank you for inviting me. It's my first trip to Australia. I've just come from a week in Tasmania with nature-loving people, and my mind is just blown and delighted by all of that. And I'm, besides plants, I'm meeting a lot of cool people. So thank you. I want to talk about feminine awareness in various different ways and aspects that you might reflect on with me. First of all, I will say, and let me jump through a couple of slides here. I only have a few, so I'll mention Botanical Dimensions, and there it is, to collect, protect, propagate, and understand, and the plants and the fungi in human use, but also their lore, and the lore is the stories. And so the stories is where I learn a lot, and that's a lot of how I teach too, and what I share. Because the lore comes from the same word as learn. It's an old word for both learn and to teach. And that's that transmission of what we're gathering and then what we're sharing, and the way that we do that by telling and by showing and by modeling for society at large. What do people who take psychedelics look like, and what do they do, and what are our values? And so I feel that that's a really important part of it, is living a psychedelic life, whatever that may mean, is part of the medicine that we are given by these plants and mushrooms, and in some cases drugs. I'm old school. I've been doing this for 50 years, like a few other people here, and taking psychedelics. And I give a great big, thank you and nod to LSD for blowing my mind in the first place and putting me in this realm. And but over the years, as much as I still go back and shake LSD's hand now and then, I really am a plant and mushroom person. And so it's not about, all the acronymed things. I don't really know them so well, but I do know something about being psychedelic. And I think you do too. So I want to talk about that awareness, those tools that we learn, the ways that it affects our values in our life choices when we're not maybe on psychedelics, but we're living a psychedelic life. What does that mean, and what is our role then in the planet? And I feel this is where the feminine comes in, where feminine qualities in ourselves, each of us, men and women, we all, as you surely know if you've ever taken anything, we all have both the masculine and the feminine within us, and we're manifesting that in various forms and degrees of balance. And also, what are the feminine qualities in the plants and the mushrooms themselves, and in the society that they generate, of which this is part. But I try to couch whatever I am considering, any question that I'm considering at the moment, in this perspective, in the ethnobotanical perspective, that we are living in a world of plants, that we are living in a world of nature, and we are nature. And that, for me, grounds me. I feel that I don't want to go off too far on the discussing research, although it's such a lively topic, and we just turned it over. So I'm not going to right this moment, but I'll probably get back to it. So one of my approaches, and the older I get, the more I feel that I just teach techniques. Almost like psychic housekeeping and ways of relating to each other, and each other would include the plants and mushrooms. And so one of my simplest methods for that is personifying. It's personifying nature. And with the idea that each species is a being, and our species is a single being. And as though, whether you're from North America or Europe or Australia, you know that indigenous people tend to personify each species. This is when Coyote arrived on the scene, and this is what happened when he met Bear. And here we have wombat, and what did he or she arise from, what story, and when human met wombat, what was their first conversation. So it's like where we take each species up to the level of being a theatrical character, because we're looking at their essential qualities. And that I find when I'm meeting a plant, whether I'm meeting it in the woods, whether as I am here meeting all these new species and even new families of plants, or whether I, especially when I ingest one, then my question is, hello, who are you? So nice to meet you. Welcome to my body. Welcome to my perceptions. What do I see in the world now that you are walking in my body, now that you are looking through my eyes, now that I am looking through your eyes? That's this integration, this matrix that we're all part of. But I find that the psychedelic state allows us to remember that we're in this matrix, and that when we're engaged in that intimate kind of dance with another species, asking to be given the gift of its consciousness or its windows through which it sees other consciousnesses, then that's a very deeply feminine embeddedness in the presumed consciousness of another species. It's interspecies communication on the deepest level. It's like being lovers. And so I don't think of it exactly as I'm taking a mushroom and it's going to, then I'm going to go do this. It's like I'm really diving into a deep cellular communication with another organism that has this opportunity of a few hours to have hands and feet and speak and move and be part human. And for me, for a few hours, I get to feel that mycelial network and guess at those relationships of where that reaches and how many other organisms that's connected to and what kind of communications are flowing between them. It's nature love, it really is, but it's also such a rare opportunity to be in the consciousness of another species. That kind of experience is a very feminine experience. It is the part of us that gives in, that quiets down, that listens, that is receptive, that is weaving things together. And the weaver and the mender is one of those archetypes that's just so crucial right now. It always has been all through human history, but I think it's one of the roles that psychedelic people have right now, that healers of all sorts have. But speaking for us, that we're really part of what we're doing, part of this fascination. We may think of it as a social movement, we may think of it as a quest for personal healing, but part of what we're doing is, as fast as the world seems to be coming apart and going crazy, we're trying to weave it back together in little ways. And we each have ways of doing that. It's by connecting with each other. Sometimes it's energetic, by getting into an altered state and dancing or making music or art in some way. Sometimes it's just emoting, just, remembering what love feels like or remembering what peace feels like and rebalancing. So I've worked a lot with indigenous people in Latin America, way back in the 70s with the ayahuasca, some ayahuasca people, before the complicated developments of the last few decades, which have kind of made me step back from that world and from that beautiful medicine, although I still hold it very dear in my heart. But my work just doesn't feel like it's in that. And so I have worked in the last 23 years with Mazatec people in Mexico, and I'm going to give a talk about that, I think, on Sunday. And they are renowned for working with various psilocybin mushroom species and Salvia divinorum. And so I'm going to talk about that, and I've been asked to specifically talk about that great mystery, Salvia divinorum. But one of the gifts they've given me, this clan that I worked with, is another set of eyes, so that when I'm in this culture, and something happens, something feels off kilter, something unexpected occurs, a question arises that I'm applying my logic to, but it's not really getting to the beginning of the answer, then I just remember, oh yes, how would these people who live in another worldview entirely, and whom I know very, very well, I have godchildren there, we've taken many mushrooms together, we've prayed together in all sorts of situations. I've watched their tragedies and they've watched mine. And so how would they see this situation? For me, that's a feminine perspective. It is rooted in how we walk through the world. Your problems occur to a person, to a family, because of loss of balance, most of all. So techniques of seeking balance, finding balance, maintaining balance, restoring it when it wobbles are primary shamanic techniques for living very intelligent, astute, and yet grounded in the heart, observant of nature, thinking in the long term, many generations back, many generations forward. Those are the aspects of these very poor and imperfect indigenous people that I just have been blessed to connect with. And whenever I step back into that, out of my intellectual American, the gender's out of balance, the power gone nuts, the news, all of the stuff that is so distressing to so many of us, whenever I step back into that, how would they see this particular moment or this situation? Then I'm grounded again. And then I have a different perspective. So I find that's feminine, to be grounded, to be in balance, to be, to let go of the 1,000 distractions and worries and agendas and grudges and all those things that we have piled on us like we're a tower of that can't balance. Each one of us, I think it's just like the modern condition. And to get back to that flowing, rooted reality is just, that's the medicine. That's the medicine for me. And that gives me then my sense of my work in the next bit of the path. We're all looking for our path, I think, and our paths are collective and to some extent individual. And we need to be connected to the whole. We need to be connected to the matrix to have insight about what our path is. The shamanic state, the psychedelic state, it manifests all things. We know that that's possible. Crossing that threshold out of daily life and into that other kind of awareness where we can understand things in a different way than we can in daily life, where we can recognize from my point of view, and I don't want to project onto all of you, so I'm just going to share how I experience it and trust that many of you do too in a similar way. But that insight into where are things torn, where is there something that is within my reach to help, to mend, to soothe, to complement, to appreciate, to celebrate. We each have all those realms within our reach, and sometimes we're just so focused on that thing that we haven't reached yet, that thing, that goal beyond us, that lack of something, that the grinding aspect of life, that we forget to be in that state. I've said many times that people, the Mazatec people I've worked with, particularly, but you've seen it in ayahuasca circles, and we've seen it in our own homes, in our own lives. Psychedelics make us grateful, don't they? Don't you have a moment where you really, or a long moment, or an hour, where you really feel grateful to be alive, and you really realize that despite the problems, despite the unfinishedness of this project of being alive, that we're so blessed by the beauty and by the collective, by community, and by these little organisms that offer themselves to us to increase our awareness, to empower us to be more interactive in this weaving kind of way in the world. I feel, touching on the presentation that David just did and the discussion, I feel that the underground itself is feminine, that it's distributed throughout, that it's a matrix. It's not perfect. We know that there are hierarchies and strange, all the things that lack of an overarching control can generate. But it's like the ground. It's where the roots are. It's where things move. It's where a lot of innovation happens. And personally, I just trust the underground. I trust the underground at each of these moments, including when we're challenged to, we're going in the States right now, and ironically in California, despite the reputation it likes to think it has, we're going through an absolutely absurd circus of pseudo-legalization of cannabis. And I trust that the underground is going to work with the plant to keep a lot of us nicely high, no matter what the heck all those powers that be try to do while they're pretending that it's legalization. And I think that model, we're working it out with cannabis right now. We worked it out with alcohol there, 80 years ago. We have to keep working it out, apparently. But I think that model of the balance between the underground prohibition, the lifting of prohibition and then the controls, the new form of controls that come in. I want to be in the roots of that. I want to be the one who's always like planting seeds and feeling what is the zeitgeist that's underneath, what is actually healing the people, what is actually helping soothe the fever of the planet. And again, I've learned from healers that's our real job, that as conscious people, our real job is every day to calm the world a little bit. There's no way we can make it too calm. It will never be too calm. It's just to add some awareness, a prayer, an action, whatever form your consciousness exhibits, to add that to the world so that we can calm and soothe this wild, wild world a little bit. And in the process, that's what heals us. We're giving to the big picture. We're giving because we know it always needs it. And then if we've got our own stuff, that helps us with our own stuff. So this is a feminine principle, I believe. The underground, the innovation, the way of nurturing that arises through intuition in individuals, in families, in collectives, the way we raise our children, the way we take care of our elders who are dying, the way we go through birthing, all these things that are informed by our psychedelic experience. And they're not all controllable. There is no top down or there are attempts to be, but we're not following it on how we do each of those things. These are primary, ancient, eternal human behaviors and values. And I feel that the plants and the mushrooms are each in their own way, because they're each unique in what they offer, but they're each helping us see ways to be more whole as a collective and ways to help soothe this craziness. It's intense, as you all know, to go into really thinking about the madness in the world when you're in one of these states. It's intense every day, isn't it? But particularly, say you've taken, a nice big dose of psilocybin mushrooms and you start meditating on the way the world seems to be going. And then I think there's a role there. It's part of witnessing, which is really sorrow, allowing us to feel in that state when your heart is open and your mind is aware, to feel the loss of species, to feel the discomfort and poverty of so many people in the world, to feel, the power of ignorance and how it seems to be on the rise. And so that's when I've said before, that's when I feel that the kind of bathing yourself in your own tears, just tears of reality, just like, oh, it's just a beautiful, tragic, joyous, wild place. And I want to feel all of it. And that's part of the medicine that we give back. This whole thing is reciprocal. One of the reasons that I think it's really important to look back at these traditions and at these techniques, at these shamanic techniques, at the way that ceremonies are managed, or whether healers train by doing something by themselves many times in the wilderness alone, or whether they are apprenticed for years to one species and then to another. All of these ancient methods are so, they're the folk research that has been going on for 10,000, 100,000 years. It seems now from the evidence quite possible that other species of humans, like the Neanderthals, were doing ceremonies. They have ritual grave sites. They knew plants. There's cannabis showing up in the older and older graves all of the time, and the mushrooms, all of these things. So, and we know that people have been gathering around fires and singing songs and telling stories, but also engaging with these insightful agents, these plants and fungi for, many thousands of years. And my method is not to find someone else's system and copy it exactly. That's strange in a few different ways and uncomfortable. But also it's not needed, because we all really have ancestors who participated in things like this. Most of us here are European descended, and that seems to be the way at psychedelic conferences. We must be the people who, who really need it, and who also have the privilege to be able to explore these realms in the 20th and 21st century. But I look back at these techniques, at these ways of knowing, because somebody's been doing research for a really long time, undocumented, not hierarchical, not recorded in written language, passed down in stories, ceremony to ceremony passed on. And those are like, there's a pattern of shamanic behavior, of ways to be in these states. It's like a template where there's only so many ways to use a rattle, to make percussion, to change the energy in a situation that's awkward, to change the rhythm of a song so that it soothes everyone in the circle after a scare or a spook, to sweep people with leaves and smoke and cleanse them and lighten them up. These techniques have been used around the world for far longer than we can even guess at, and they're just as powerful today. But I don't think we should dismiss them or think, even unconsciously, I'm sure you wouldn't say this out loud, but think they're quaint, that era is over, now we're doing research, this is how we document it, whether it's contemporary sanctioned research or contemporary unsanctioned research. There's a long history here. Folk research, another feminine aspect of what a society does, means it's happening in your home, it's happening in your mind, it's happening in your garden, it's happening among friends, it's happening at festivals, it's happening in very serious healing circles, it's happening in loving relationships, in parent and children relationships. And that is all folk research. It's what's gotten us this far. We've been doing it with herbs and medicinal herbs. We've been doing it with psychedelic plants and fungi. We've been doing it with techniques that take care of the world for a very, very long time. And to me, that's the book. That's the book that we look at and that we learn from, and then incorporate those into going forward. And we're not mimicking a particular culture, doing a particular thing, because these are archetypal behaviors that archaic people have always done, and we come from archaic people as well. It's in our memories, and it arises through intuition. So learning intuition, learning to listen to one's intuition, which psychedelics are so helpful with, letting stuff well up and not directing it. When I, many years ago, working in the Amazon, a wonderful little old woman, she said a couple of things. She said, I'm no shaman, but I've always hung out with shamans and curanderos because I just learned so much. So I just feed them and they let me hang out. And here's something I learned. She said, you people from other places, you always think you know what you're looking for. And then you miss what's offering itself to you right in front of you. Suspend that sense that you're sure what you're looking for and just see what speaks to you. It's all ready to like murmur and whisper, but you have to slow way down and not have expectations and let the world well up and offer itself to you. And in that state of mind, you'll hear it, you'll understand it, you'll receive a little nugget. You'll be able to carry that with you and turn that nugget or that gem over and over and over and get more and more from it. But you won't find it if you're looking for it. So I thought, now that's a feminine perspective on learning, on being, and on the plants and how they present themselves to us. I think we've talked about that a bit. I'll say about this image that was dug up under a village in the Ecuadorian Amazon about 30 years ago by the people who still live in that village. And they said it came from their ancestors. And it's a vessel, it's a ceramic vessel for pouring the prepared ayahuasca into before the ceremony to serve it. And so the vessel is the human head. And the plants, after they're brewed, are poured into it and served out of there. And it's a wonderful metaphor. I thought I would share that with you. And I also want to talk about an aspect of the feminine that I think is really important. And that's, I feel that the feminine intelligence, again, in men or in women, that this is an aspect of our intelligence, which I call cutting through, seeing through, the ability to part veils and actually see what's through behind the veil, to take the tarot card of the swords, the Queen of Swords, and just this ability to pierce the illusion and say what you see, to be a straight shooter for the best possible reasons. But that kind of intelligence, it's a clear, sharp, forthright kind of intelligence. And I'd be surprised if you don't know a woman who has that kind of intelligence, and that you have it in yourself, even if you're not a woman. And I want to show you this example. This is an Ecuadorian deity of the gardens for the Quechua people, Nunguli. And she's both the great mother of every garden in the jungle. She's living there. There are stones and snakes and things that represent her in every garden. She's a warrior of protecting the garden and of relating to the problems even that come from under the soil. And she's nourishing it at the same time. And everyone prays that this fierce, loving garden mother will show up in their garden, because it's the only way that they will really grow food and nourish their families. And to me, I thought, now that's that aspect of the feminine, that clear, directed, intelligent, discerning. And so discernment is one of the qualities that I feel is sometimes in short supply in at least parts of the psychedelic community. And I don't know many Australians yet, and I haven't really gotten deeply into your psychedelic society yet, but I know you too. Some of you come and go from South America, or the ayahuasca reaches out in that way that it does. Talk about a plant and wondering what its story is. Reaches out and touches people around the planet. But it's so enchanting, and it's so, the experience, the ayahuasca experience itself is so variable, It's a recipe. It's not a single species, so it's more variable than all these others we're talking about. Never made quite the same way twice. And then there's so many other costumes and decorations and desires and peer pressure and expertise and poseurs and, all of that in this 21st century ayahuasca world, that I would say the thing that people wading into that world or up to their eyebrows in that world need is discernment. That with all kinds of shamanism, with all kinds of calls for help, we need to have that ability to discern whether the practitioner or whether the drug itself or whether the setting or whether the friends who just pulled you into it are actually your medicine, are actually there in some way for you, to help you. And that discernment is a balancing part of that feminine principle, I think. It's that clear seeing. And we get so swept up into these movements, and then we don't really pause often, at least until we're old, and say, is this really the next step I want to take? Maybe I want to take it, but not here, not right now, not with these people, not with that brew. I don't have a really good feeling about that practitioner there who just laid all this out. Even if I did just pay $300, I still don't have to do it if it's not really the best thing for me. Discerning those aspects and then discerning that from our natural dread of a big, exciting new experience, telling the difference there, I think that's really a skill set that we're not that good at yet, and that I describe it in this detail in the hopes that it will give you, a list of questions to work from. So you'll be okay. The more that you're okay, each of you, and balanced, and then that radiates from you into the people around you and into the passion that you have for doing something in the world and the quality of whatever you do, that will all just be improved if you are very careful about every step that you take. I come from a time when we were all taking handfuls of LSD, and we didn't know who'd made it or where it came from, and it was a wonderful, Dionysus inspired chaos, and there were many casualties, and there was a lot of brilliance, and I don't regret a moment of it. And for our species, I think that unregulated chaos was actually absolutely what we needed. We just needed to, take that basket of everything and just shake it all up. And I'm grateful that LSD turned up in the amounts that it did, when it did, without any licenses and without any of the controls on it, because it swept through like it just washed through us and caused, I really give that credit for a lot of the social change, the positive social change that has happened since then, in terms of our reviewing our values and reviewing our cultural habits and, changing our relationship to nature and to food and to family and to birth and to death and to how we take care of each other. And that gets modeled then in these 50 years later in these settings where at festivals we take care of each other, in truth talking with your family or your partner, in these ways that if you grew up in the 40s or the 50s, which sounds like an incredibly long time ago, that didn't happen, it was a different type of communication and a different type of society. And at least from my point of view, and I know many others, this great wash of change came through, which was experienced as a matrix and which was experienced as feminine qualities and allowed feminine qualities in individuals who would not have acknowledged them to arise and to inform us and to help us be better human beings, better artists, better scientists, better whatever we have chosen to be, whatever path we're following. So one of the questions is just this one. It relates to what I said about my Mazatec friends. It's just when faced with any decision or any conundrum, small or large, but particularly when you feel like you're constricted, you get it. It's an energetic thing. You feel it constricted, have to make a decision. Ask yourself this question: is there some completely different way to look at this? Is there some way to take whatever the situation is and turn it around and really look at it in the way that you would do if you were on a psychedelic, embodying that kind of awareness that we develop over many experiences, over years, and using it in your daily life? Maybe you do already, but not everyone does. So I bring it up as one small offering because I do think that that the cures arise. There's an old medieval saying I've quoted before. Cures arise. They come to mind. They appear at hand because they are nearby, and that is the way it has always been. And that's about the plants that you need showing up near where you need them. But in this case, our millennium needed this kind of medicine, and it arose, and aren't we grateful for it? So thank you very much.